Do you want to have it all, roadie nerds? A race bike that is both exceptionally lightweight and aerodynamically quick? That is what Trek hopes it has accomplished with the new Madone, which merges the outgoing, lightweight Emonda climbing bike with the previously deep-tubed Aero-Madone. Normally, aero means heavier, as aero shapes are bigger and thus heavier than ultra-lightweight shapes, whether in frame tubing or on wheels. Here, a surprising piece of the puzzle is the new bottles and cages, which Trek says are as important to the overall aero package as the wheels. But, as always, there is a price in the new shape that may not be the most easy to live with. And, of course, there is the matter of the price tag. In this video, I'll tell you what's new with the all-new Madone, which starts at $3,500 for a bike equipped with Shimano 105, goes up to $13,500 for this SLR9 superbike, and even goes up into the stratosphere from there. Trek has a new P1 Ultimate program for a cool $25,000, which gets you, of course, whatever parts you would like, but also dedicated time with designers who will create your dream bike. But back down here on Earth, I'll tell you my experience with what this bike is like to ride, how it compares to other bikes on the market, and what these bottles are like to live with. Trek started this project a couple years ago as the next iteration of the Emonda, the ultralight climbing bike. Like a lot of bike companies, there's a lot of pull towards the center once you specialize. If you've got a very aero bike, you want to make it lighter. If you've got a very light bike, you want to make it aero. That gravitational force pulled the two together. Trek says this was not part of their SKU reduction. Trek recently chopped 40% of its number of models, but this also happens to dovetail into that program. While a SKU reduction is a business-driven thing, having one bike that does both things well is a rider-oriented thing. In any event, Trek ended up with a bike that does both, provided you're on board with the bottles. Let's talk some numbers. The frame in size medium-large, speaking of, Trek also reduced its number of frame sizes from 8 down to 6, so what was previously a 56 is now a medium-large. This guy weighs a claimed 796 grams with a 350-gram fork, built up as dressed here to 15.5 pounds. That's a crazy lightweight bike, right? Especially for a bike that claims to be as fast as the existing aero bike with much deeper shapes. Trek tests its bikes in the wind tunnel with a pedaling mannequin. Giant does this, Canyon does this. Makes sense because bikes don't ride themselves, right? Let's look at this graph, which tells the story with these bottles again being the key here. This new bike, the Madone, is substantially faster than the Emonda. No big surprise there. Tested at a relatively real-world speed of 22 miles an hour, the new bike comes within 0.1 watt of the existing Madone. That varies, of course, depending on the particular yaw angle, but they're both pretty close. However, the outgoing Madone was tested with round bottles and normal cages, whereas this one is tested with these aero bottles, which Trek says is 3.7 watts faster than round bottles and cages on the same bike. That is massive. To be clear, the cages work with normal round bottles. There's a little space, but they're nice and snug. But the bike is designed for these guys. As these cages are seated very low in the frame and are shaped to snug up both against each other and the frame, you're effectively getting one big fat section, much like a big fat deep wheel. They're snug in the cage too. The issue with these is that they're like a speed suit or an aero helmet, and that, yes, I believe the science that they're faster, but for everyday life, they can be a little fussy to deal with. The opening is small for putting in mix, and then once you go to put them on your counter to fill them up, they don't even sit flat. You have to put them in at an exact angle, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but think about it. When you normally drink from your bottles, you're not thinking about positioning the bottle. You just grab it and put it back in. Can I feel 3.7 watts at 45 km an hour? No. But I can feel the minor annoyance of dealing with these things day to day. So I don't see most riders using these bottles on a daily basis except for race day. In any event, the bottles and cages are how you can have your cake and eat it too, of having thinner tubes and thus lightweight and still a very quick aerodynamic package. Other details on the bike. As I mentioned, it went from 8 sizes down to 6. Other changes more in name. Trek has gone away from its H1, H2, H1.5 geo nomenclature because what the heck does that mean? Trek is just calling this particular fit road race now, which makes a lot more sense compared to the endurance fit of the Madone bike. Madone's got clearance for 38s. This has clearance for 32 mil tires. Another number story that you can't see, but I think is quite important, is the comfort. The flex that is happening primarily here. Trek says this bike is 80% more comfy than the outgoing one. And unlike a 3.7 watt difference at 45 kilometers an hour, more cush was definitely something I could feel on the road. There's a new carbon 900 series OCLV, which is smoother internally than the outgoing 800. And the front triangle is made as one single piece with the bladder. While the more approachable bikes come with 2-piece cockpits, top end comes with this 1-piece, which has a slightly fatter front end than the outgoing model. Trek says they did this for a little more rider comfort, and when taking into account the entire aero package, including the rider, it was a non-issue. Enough numbers, let's talk about how this thing rides. I found it to be fast, precise, and pleasantly comfortable, as it should be for the cost of a cheap car. Do I prefer a superlight bike or an aero bike? Like the Trek designers, I want both. I want to have it all. Aero charts are fun to look at, and with aero bikes, it's something you can feel, especially tucking on descents. And lightness, when it gets down to this 15-pound range, that's absolutely something you can feel, and it's quite gratifying, not just in picking it up off the floor in the garage, but those initial accelerations, whether you're trying to outsprint your buddies or just pulling away from a stop sign. Taking this on the local Boulder group rides was fun. It's a fast bike. Small changes can be hard to feel, but going from a heavier round tube bike to a super light, super aero bike, especially with nice plush tires, absolutely that's something that you could feel. I enjoyed literally coasting away from some folks on a group ride on a downhill. I would attest most of that is because I weigh 185 pounds and they weigh like a $120 soaking wet. But aerodynamics is a thing, right? And the faster you go, the more important it becomes. And I feel like this lives up to Trek's claims that when you use the fiddly bottles and cages, it's a quick bike. I should note that like all my bike tests, this is not a paid thing. I realize YouTube is a funny place and a lot of reviews are sponsored, whether it's a cash thing or it's a, hey, if you buy this, I'll get a kickback. That's not how I do testing. Companies send me bikes, I test them, I sit on them for a while, then I ship them back. I am able to do this thanks to my supporters like Perc Coffee, for whom I will absolutely tell you to go buy their delicious product. You can use my code and save 15% on their beans roasted down there in Georgia. I should also note that this is not the first bike brand to take aero capabilities and lightness and mush them together. You guys, of course, recall that Specialized had a Venge aero bike for some time, and then the Tarmac was the ultralight road race bike. Those became one. It's now the current generation Tarmac, and the Venge has gone away. Fit is a big thing, right? Yes, this can make small changes at speed, but this makes the biggest difference far and away. And up front, the cockpit is going with the narrow is aero. This is a 42 bar, which is 39 at the hoods. This top end bike came dressed in the new SRAM's new red 12-speed axis. Bike has a UDH, universal derailleur hanger, not with a transmission style derailleur. It's got the normal derailleur. Being able to get my fit dialed in, ride a crazy light, crazy aero, and really comfortable bike was a treat. So all in all, I'm quite impressed. Things that bug me. We yammered on about the cages, but some other things here. One, I managed to break one of the little tabs on this plastic holder, just picking the bike up by the stem. That popped off. I'm sure that's a replaceable thing, but that was a mild annoyance. While the bar shape in general I find quite comfortable, the transition on the inside from the hoods to the bar is a little skinny. One thing I'd like to see from more companies is an integration like Zip has here, where there's a little bit of a lip. So hood's mounted here, your brake hoses come off, and instead of having a big chunk go immediately to a skinny chunk, this just transitions a wider, continuous platform. So a small thing, but just something I'd like to see from these guys and others going forward. Of course, this is much easier to do on a two-piece when you can move this to your liking, whereas if you did this on a one-piece, that would determine where the hood sit. So there's always compromises, right? Always compromises. But that was my one nit to pick with this bar, is that it's just a little skinny up top, and I'd like something with a slightly wider perch. And then lastly, my primary gripe of sorts with Trek's race bikes for a while now has been that I get toe overlap on a size 56, or what they're now calling a medium large bike. I realize for shorter riders that's often the case, but usually bikes this size don't have that. It's only really an issue when I'm riding slowly and trying to navigate through a parking lot or something like this, but since I'm not accustomed to thinking about that, that catches me off guard occasionally. So the new Trek-Madone, it's fast, it's light, it's comfy, it is a hoot to ride, as it should be for the price. Turns out you can have your cake and eat it too if you're willing to pay the price, both in cash, money, and in dealing with bottles that are perhaps a little fussier than a standard bottle. What questions do you have? Leave them below. I will do my best to answer. What do you guys think of this bottle cage concept? As always, I appreciate you watching, I appreciate you subscribing, and whatever shape your bottles are, just get out there and enjoy the ride.